started in about 5 minutes. That's 5 minutes after the hour. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in 2 minutes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Masonic Seminar Series. My name is Brother Katie Kumsier, and I am a member of Universal Co-Masonry, which is Freemasonry for men and women, and that is the Masonic organization that has founded and continues to support the seminar series. I am grateful for everyone who is coming from North America, the Philippines, and around the world. I hope you enjoy the next hour and a half as we talk about the mysticism of Freemasonry. As always, I would like to give a little bit of background also before we get into our seminar series. Was founded over 5 general interested in listening, as well as those who felt called to Freemasonry but didn't really understand why or what Freemasonry is. My job this evening is to provide as much from my studies and been in Masonry for the past 2 decades. And so what you will see is an ever-evolving understanding of what Freemasonry is. So even if you had seen this presentation last year or the last time I presented it, I guarantee this evening that you've never heard before. And if you are joining us for the first time, the Masonic Seminar Series is anthological, meaning that it is offered as a different topic every single month, and it is not based on the previous topic. So if you're just coming for the first time, I welcome you, but you don't have to worry about you've missed something because you came in April and not January. I do repeat the topics every year, mostly. Sometimes I like to change it up because even for myself, I love for it to be dynamic and robust instead of very stagnant and stale. I have in the general office with me here at Universal Co-Masonry, Brother Patrick Alessandra and Brother Benjamin Hartle, who are also Masons with Universal Co-Masonry, and they are working the various IT that goes along with this. We're streaming on multiple platforms in addition to Zoom. So I want to thank those brothers as they come out every month to support and use their time to volunteer for the Masonic Seminar Series. So a little bit of house rules, just the basic setup. This is a different type of platform than the Masonic Philosophical Society, which is our other organization that is offered through Universal Co-Masonry, in that this is not as much as a discussion-based, but a lecture-type series. So I will be talking a lot, and hopefully it will be for the betterment for yourself, myself, and everyone else in our virtual room. So I will talk the hour and a half. There will be moments where I will stop, present questions, open the floor up for comments. If you would like to speak, please use your virtual hand, as we can't see everyone on our screens and we don't want to overlook anyone. So use the virtual hand option. The second thing is please make sure your topic, or your question rather, is on topic. It gets very frustrating for everyone when we have a question that comes out of left field and has nothing to do with what we're talking about. If you have a question like that, I would recommend that you hold off until the very end. After we close out the seminar, myself and Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin will stay on for about 10 to 15 minutes to field questions in general or questions specific to the lecture this evening. If you are joining us from Facebook, YouTube, or X, please feel free to put your questions in the comment. Brother Patrick is running that and will be able to ask the questions on behalf of you. And Brother Benjamin is running Zoom, so if you have questions there, he will also help field those questions. So we're going to try to make sure that everyone is taken care of. I think those are the do's. There's not really any don'ts. So let's get started. I'd like to share my screen with you. You know, this is an interesting presentation for me specifically because I've been thinking a lot about the mysticism of Freemasonry and what it means and how does it really manifest itself in Masonry. And as I have looked through the pieces and the parts of my studies, I have found ultimately that it is the very fabric of Freemasonry. And hopefully this evening I can present that to you. So without further ado, let's look at what we're going to be talking about this evening. So we're going to talk about just foundational definitions. Oftentimes I find that most disagreements in any conversation is usually because people don't understand how the other person is using a term, phrase, or an idea. So I would like to lay down that foundation for us this evening If you've joined me before, you've heard me lay some of this out, but today I'm going to do it a little bit more thoroughly, and it will be definitely more connected to mysticism and Freemasonry. We're going to talk about a fork in the road. This is if you are I want to say I'm old, but an older individual, and you are familiar with Choose Your Own Adventures. This is kind of like that type of book where you get to choose. There's a fork in the road and you need to make a choice. And we'll talk about what that choice is, and what those choices mean and where it can lead. And then ultimately, we're going to talk about the path of a mystic. And hopefully you'll walk away this evening. Hopefully you've learned something new. Hopefully you have gained a deeper insight into something you had a question on, and perhaps find some practical things that you can use to help you on your journey in the world of initiation in Freemasonry. I will tell you, I am not going to give you how to do things. So if you're looking for this to be, how to become a mystic, I will talk in very vague and general terms, because it's not that every road leads to a mystic, but there are different ways to do it. And there's a lot of wrong ways to do it. So hopefully I can put out some warning signs and give you something to use in the coming days, months, and years. I do want to talk about this picture on my screen that you're seeing. This is Orpheus and his lyre. It's very beautiful, and this is on his way into Hades to retrieve his long-lost undead love. And the reason why I put this in here is because this is part of the path of a mystic, that journey, that process, that suffering, that surrendering, and ultimately that ecstasy if it is achieved. So the first term we're going to talk about is exoteric. Bless you. Is exoteric. Now, we're going to spend a little bit of time. There's not a lot of information on this page, because I think there have been innumerable quantities of books that have been written on the exoteric mysteries. In communities such as Freemasonry, in the Western esoteric tradition, you will find that we oftentimes make synonymous the word exoteric with the lesser mysteries. The exoteric is information that is meant and is suitable for the public, but it is not enough for the initiated, and I'll explain what that means a little bit later. So it's knowledge for the uninitiated, people who have not undergone certain ceremonies that marks them ready for something greater. And the one thing I really want to emphasize is that when I say the lesser mysteries, a lot of people will try to put a moral attachment, that by saying lesser, I'm saying is not as good as. Lesser does not mean no less important. In fact, lesser is extremely important. It lays the foundation for the path. And if you're an individual who's maybe not, has not a background in the exoteric religions, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Taoism, Jainism, whatever religion that you grew up with or that you're aware of, if you are not a practitioner of that or have never been and find yourself ignorant of them, don't worry, you're not at a loss, but you do have some studying to do and some acquaintances to meet. Because the lesser mysteries, as I said, are the pylons and walls and buttresses of the greater mysteries. And they build an insight into the greater mysteries that otherwise you don't necessarily get if you come without that background. Now, the question is, oftentimes people will say, well, what exoteric religion, what religion for the masses should I start studying? That really depends on you and your bent of mind. We'll talk about the perennial faith, the perennial wisdom here in a bit, but all major religions across the world and across history have some unifying aspects to them. So ultimately, you can find pieces and threads that you can study that will start to help build out your edifice of understanding and knowledge about philosophy, religion, and spirituality. So I think it's very important to put out there that lesser mysteries doesn't have a moral import. It just means it's coming first. And it's a broad information. To kind of overuse a saying that people say, can't teach a kid a calculus. Well, you have to start with math first, basic math, and you move your way up. And there's nothing wrong with, basic algebra, basic math, four function math. In fact, they're completely important to getting to the higher differential equations and stuff like that in the higher math and sciences. So think of exoteric like that. It's that basis of which you need to move through in order to understand that which is coming after. And I have up here just some symbols of the various different major churches for the public that would be falling underneath the lesser mysteries. So anyone who has an open door policy, anyone can come in, is more than likely to be an exoteric or lesser mystery. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to go from broad, public, all the way up to mystic, which is singular and individual, just so you have an idea of where we're going. So esoteric is, in the case of the word, in the way that we're using it, means the greater mysteries. So once you have a foundational knowledge in the exoteric religion, whatever one that may be, maybe it's many, you are ready possibly to go to the greater mysteries. And this is, esotericism is going to be defined as a corpus of knowledge and insight that is meant for just a specific few. It is understood by a few. And there's this quote here: all the exoteric teachings, so all the religion and spiritual traditions for the masses, are only designed to give you the type of life that will allow you to practice the esoteric teachings. I very much agree and love this quote because it shows how one is a tandem to the other, and you cannot go without these. So when we look at the esoteric or the greater mysteries, again, this is where we see, if you want to look kind of a pyramid, that broad base of the exo getting smaller and going for the esoteric. There are many different greater mysteries. Definitely, there were a lot more pre-Christian times before Theodosius II outlawed all pagan religions. I think it was in 386 AD, where he quashed and penalized and criminalized pagan religion in general, which the greater mysteries fell underneath in that umbrella. So you had the different greater mysteries of Persephone and Dionysius. You have, here's the cult of Mithras, which is coming under more imperial times. When you look back, you also have the not the cult, but the what's the word I'm looking for? The mysteries of Dionysian, Orpheus. There's the one I was looking for. For Orpheus, you have the Pythagorean schools under Pythagoras. You have many, many different greater mysteries. And Freemasonry is going to come from that time. So when we look at Theodosius II, when he made it punitive for you to belong to a greater mystery, a lot of the greater mysteries were either lost, buried, or went underground from practice because it was a penalty of death if you were found to be practicing any of these. So when we look at the esoteric, we're looking at someone who is ready to go to something higher. Now, when I use the word higher, I'm referring to consciousness. And you can say spiritual development if you like that phrase better. But ultimately, when you look at the exoteric, you're looking at broad understanding, right? Which requires a certain level of consciousness to interpret, to digest, and to internalize. When you look at the esoteric, you need to be at a higher consciousness in order to grasp what's coming out of that. So oftentimes you'll see that esoteric studies kind of fall outside of the purview of religion and science, although I don't agree with that statement. I've read that many times over the years, that you have religion, you have esotericism, and you have science. But I think to the true esoteric individual, you can find all sorts of meaning in between the spaces of any type of system that you're studying. But in order to see what's in between the spaces, you have to be able to have a consciousness to grasp that. So what happens is in the exoteric studies, when we are either going to our various religious practices, or we're reading about it and studying it and trying to get it through that way, you're preparing yourself spiritually, mentally, physically, philosophically to go to the next stage of understanding. Just as you collect a corpus of knowledge that is basic math, you understand how to manipulate math, how to computate math, That's getting you ready for, the rotation of shapes and geometry and understanding surface area and volume and all of those other pieces that are really hard to grasp onto in order, because you don't have the understanding. Now, when I used to teach advanced science when back in my day, I taught many different levels of chemistry. And I taught from general conceptuals below that all the way through honors and advanced placement. Excuse me. And I remember telling my advanced placement, my AP kids, I said, look, all of your time with me last year in honors or general chemistry, you will find that I wasn't completely honest with you in what I was telling you, because I can't tell you everything about how an atom interacts with another atom or how molecules interplay with each other unless you have the basics underneath you. But I have to be very broad about those basics. I have to be very broad about that, be very broad strokes to the point where it's almost oversimplifying it. But now that you have a cursory understanding of how, the measurable world works, now I can get into more of the specifics, and we can start seeing that maybe I gave you, the exception to the rule as the rule in your first year chemistry, but now you're going to see how the rule really is. And that to me is a perfect example of exoteric and esoteric. It's giving you broad strokes. It's helping you to understand at a lower level of consciousness the basics. It's trying to help you get to understand how to connect with that which is beyond yourself, how to discipline yourself, how to obey higher laws, whether they're God's law or nature's law. That's what it's trying to get you to do. And then in the esoteric, when you start going deeper into understanding, then you can start parsing out the nuances. You're going to start to see, oh, that's what this meant over here. This is how it needs to be applied, not this way. And you can start to, if you want to say, spiritually rotate shapes, to start to reorient yourself in the direction that you're going, because now you understand more of the nuances. So you're going from a very broad understanding that is not obviously going to carry all the exceptions within it. It's going to give you the big idea. And then esoteric is going to give you, when you're ready, the nuances, more of the nuances. I want to say all of the nuances, more of the nuances of what you're studying about. So I really like this quote from Lenz when he talks about the exoteric teachings giving you the life that will allow you to live, to practice the higher understanding. And in order to live what you're studying, it means you have to understand it. And if you understand it, you have to be able to recognize it. You have to be able to cognitively digest it. And so when we look at this, there is a progression. And I know there's a lot of people in this world, especially people I've run into, who are really anti-religion, organized religion. I would take a step back and maybe dissociate the people and the practitioners from the theology of it, and see what the theology is trying to teach, not so much how other people have applied it in their understanding. They're very different. And I speak from my own personal experience of having to do exactly the same thing, of being able to separate the individuals from the theology of what I grew up in. That takes a certain level of consciousness to realize there are two separate things. And when you can break that connection to some extent, and you can stretch it out and put, practitioners and all their great and bad decisions on the side, and look at what theology is trying to teach, you can better understand what it's trying to get into your cognizance, into your consciousness. And then you can move through to the greater mysteries. We'll talk more about the greater mysteries, I hope, if we have some time. I'm going to go through the next slide, and then we're going to stop for questions and comments. So the next one is the occult. And I apologize, I'm looking off screen because my computer is on to my right side here. So you have exoteric, you have esoteric, and then you have the occult. Now, the occult wasn't a word that was known for, wasn't used very often, but it was popularized by the Russian mystic and theosophist Helena Blavatsky. And she is known across all types of literature, not just theosophical literature, for bringing over Eastern mysticism, Eastern philosophy, and blending it with Western mysticism. And from that, she generated the word. She didn't generate it. She just popularized the word occult. And as you can see here in the first bullet, it's occult means hidden. So we're trying to uncover even further what is in the nuance, what's in the spaces of ideas and philosophies. So when we look at the occult, I remember the first time I learned this word, and I was very guilty of it. I thought it was cult, C-U-L-T. Now, there is a substantive difference between the two. Occult means hidden. Cult, C-U-L-T, is it's a pejorative in modern society. It wasn't back in the ancient Greece and moving forward for a long time. But now it has a pejorative of something that's brainwashing, that cannot leave, and it's restrictive and isolative, and that's not what occult means. They're very different. So please keep that demarcation in your mind so that we don't conflate the two. So when we look at occult, this is someone who's like looking at this picture that you see here on the slide. What information is hidden in there? Now, you could bring this to the masses, and I've done it before, and there's just like a lot of comments are, that's weird, that's too weird for me, that's some mumbo jumbo, voodoo crap, or whatever they have to say. And that shows you where they are in their understanding at one level. Bring it to someone who is at the level of esotericism, where they start to feel more compelled to look deeper, they're going to find an intrigue here. That is very interesting. And they'll sit with it and let it wash over them and try to get used to it and acclimate. The occultists will push further and try to understand what this image is. Now we'll talk about how it's done here in a minute. By many people. There's, like I said, there's different ways to do it, but the occultists will try to figure out, well, what does the sun mean in different symbolical systems? And here you have a serpent with the lion, face the mane of a lion, but still kind of the mouth, the jaws of a snake. And what is the moon? Why is the moon a sliver? And why is there a star? And it looks like there's either a candle flame or possibly a yod. There is some writing across the top. What does all of this mean? The occultist would try to understand that. Because what the occultist understands at the level of their consciousness is that, and this is what initiatic orders across time and space have all asserted, that there's a secret philosophy underlying all occult practices. So if you choose to study alchemy, if you choose to study, ancient astrology, I say ancient because I don't want you to think modern as in, the grocery stands and the horoscopes that are there, that's not what I'm talking about. If you choose to do Kabbalah, if you try to do, study all these different things, the occultist knows that between all of them, no matter which system you choose to study, there is a secret philosophy. And that is what he's looking at. Okay? That is what he's trying to understand. So that which is hidden. So if you want to think about it, you have a person, we'll do it this way. We have a person standing here, you have a symbol, like in this case, you have the picture in between, and then you have the truth on the other side. Okay. The occultist is looking at that symbol and trying to internalize what it means. Okay. The esotericist is sitting back here, trying to let it wash over them so they can be familiar and comfortable with it, and not so uncomfortable as their consciousness tries to grok at least its presence. And then you have the exotericist out here that may not even venture to look at it, or might just readily dismiss it. So as promised, I am going to stop here for any questions and comments about what has been presented thus far. I'd like to open up the floor for anyone who's interested. I promise I'll be really nice. I think I'm nice every month with questions. So if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask, because it's going to be a long hour and a half of me just talking if no one else wants to share their ideas. All right. And there's no one on our other platforms, correct? Okay. All right, without further ado. Oh, Brother Maya. There we go. We're getting some people here. All right, Brother Maya.
Are you going to be talking about the intuition?
1 second. Can you turn up my volume? Because I'm having a hard time hearing her. Sorry, Brother Maya. My volume's really far away. Hello, Brother Patrick. All right, there we go. Ask me one more time.
Good to see you. Are you going to be talking about the intuition?
I will be talking about intuition a little bit later, although I don't think it doesn't have to wait till later because intuition is throughout the whole thing. But yes, do you want to add some comments before we get there?
No, I just want to hear what you have to say.
If I forget, because my memory is crap at the moment, if I forget, please remind me to bring it up. Okay.
It's a deal.
Maya. All right. Sorry. Thank you, Maya. Amy. Amy Course.
Hi, it's been a bit.
It's been a bit.
So my question would be in response to hidden mysteries and based on people subjectively coming to an understanding of the secrets. If I were to look at the picture and see something differently based on my growth, but then somebody else would look at the snake and the lion and the sun and have a different understanding, would that make it like pass or fail of like whether you're getting what you're supposed to get from the philosophy, or are the answers going to be different?
It's a great question, Amy, and academia has failed you if we think that there's only pass and fail. So we get an F on that, and I'll take personal responsibility as a representative of education for that. Is it pass or fail? Yes and no. I would say no, because you're at your level of understanding. I remember when I first started getting into Masonry and this whole vast universe of symbolism and philosophic understanding and religious contemplation, I was very far off the mark of what certain things meant, but I had to start somewhere, right? So when we look at symbols, they're not necessarily subjective. We talked about symbolism back in January, and I'll bring a little bit forward here just for those who weren't with us. Each symbol has its own intrinsic meaning. Now you can have your perception of how it impacts you. If you like or you don't like that particular sign or symbol, and you really, you can go from there. But ultimately, as I say, like if I were to tell you that a 5-pointed star represented infinite time and space, that's incorrect. That's the Ouroboros, that's the circle, that's something else. There's another symbol that means that. And sometimes we can get close, but we're often off the mark. So is it a pass fail? No, it just means you have more work to do. But if you want to be stuck in that interpretation, that's where I would say the failure comes in. The cross means only this, and it can never mean anything else. And you should check that out, because maybe you're right, but I don't, probably not, especially at first brush. So every initiatic order, every greater mystery is trying to tell us something specific. And it may not just be one thing, it could be multiple things, but it's ultimately trying to teach us something. And we have to be able to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And if we just want to stay stuck in our interpretations of something, then we may most likely not be able to see or hear what it's trying to tell us. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Just 5 more seconds, I promise. I personally don't think that the educational system made me feel that way. So before you take responsibility for that, that's not what I actually said.
I like it. Thank you for that. Brother Hines.
All right, I have a question about the serpent, the lion serpent in the picture. Is the name above it? Is that saying Al-Adil Broth? Is it the name of the serpent itself, Adil Broth, like Adil?
You're talking about the name that goes around the edge?
The name that goes around.
I didn't actually look at that. I just picked a picture that I thought would make people either really intrigued or uncomfortable. So I didn't actually scrutinize this particular one, but I'd be happy to look at it after the seminar and get back to you by email on whether or not what that particular saying is across the top.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have a better answer. All right. Is there anything else before I move on? Okay. All right. So we've talked about exoteric. We've talked about esoteric. We've talked about the occult. And we're going to go further because we're already at the word mysticism and mystic, and it's like, well, we're 5 minutes into the presentation, but don't worry, there's more to it. Mysticism comes after the occult, and you can't get to mysticism without the occult, without the esoteric, and without the exoteric. And I think for some people this rubs wrong because either they have a profound, innate desire to be a mystic, and there's a lot of work to get there, and maybe they don't want to do that, or they feel compelled that they are a mystic already and they haven't done the work beforehand. When I was going through undergrad, I wanted to be a chemist, but just because I wanted it didn't mean I was it. And that meant I have to do the work. So even though mystic is very, very personal, it still requires a lot of preparation beforehand before you can get there. And mystic is going to talk about mysticism. It's going to talk about the initiate. We're looking at someone who's initiated into a mystery religion. Freemasonry is a mystery religion. And then when I use the word religion, I am not talking about the exoteric. I'm talking about the esoteric. It is a greater mystery. Okay, it is a mystery religion. It is something that is trying to reunite you with the great architect. So that's regular, which is where religion comes from, etymologically speaking. And it's a mystery. Not everything's given to you at once. Everything is done by degrees and advancements, just as they were done in ancient Greece and Hellenistic periods and moving forward, as well as back, I guess you could say. So when we look at mysticism, we're looking at a Greek word, and there was some other words, other derivatives I saw, but the Greek word tends to stand forward, scholastically speaking. And it comes from the idea to close. And to close can mean the eyes, the ears, a flower. It means to close. So a mystic is to close the eyes and ears. And that's an interesting thing to sit with. Like, what does that mean? And we have to come to understand that. Now, there's a kind of a bifurcation in interpretation of mysticism. So a mystic can be one of two things. You have the Western understanding, interpretation, and explanation, and then you have the Eastern. And I would say that Freemasonry is definitely going to fall under the Western because it is a Western mystery religion. So the Western interpretation is that when you have a mystical experience, you have an absolute oneness with the great architect, an absolute oneness with the creative force, the highest power of all in the universe, whatever that may be. The Eastern philosophy, and this is for most of the major religions coming out of the Eastern world, you're going to see the opposite. It is nothingness. It's the complete emptying of everything. And so when we talk about mysticism in the context of Freemasonry, I am talking about the Western understanding and interpretation of it, not the Eastern. So some people who come from maybe Buddhic or Confucianism, they'll be like, no, it's to get completely, to fill the void, to fill the nothing. And Masonry is all about having the experience where you transcend and commune with the highest creative principle in the universe. So mystic is someone who has mystical experiences, and mysticism is the practice of those mystical experiences. So keep that in mind. A mystic is someone who seeks to transcend the manifested world and come into that absolute oneness with the universe, and to feel As someone said yesterday, we had a conversation, a brother and I, about how humanity is built to see edges. We're built to see boundaries. And when you're a mystic, you're trying to dissolve those boundaries. You're trying to become one with what's around you. And a mystic is someone who seeks this. So I told you that you have a choice. You have a choice laid before you. And some of you have already chosen. Some of you are about to choose, maybe not in this moment, but in days to come. And some of you didn't even realize you had a choice. So there are two choices. You can, when you start to walk the path towards mysticism, towards being a mystic, you have the left-hand path and you have the right-hand path. Now, left-hand path, and if you notice, I did pick a very stated picture. Left-hand path leads to trouble. The right-hand path leads to sunshine and hopefully blue skies. Okay. So one of the things that I find that, especially in Western civilization, is we're too quick, or we're not quick enough to make boundaries. For as much as we see edges and boundaries of things, we really don't want to add judgment to what other people are doing. But Freemasonry asserts that there is objective good. And if there's objective good, there has to be something opposite of that, the further you stray from the good, the more you get into the realm that's over here, which is the bad, or the evil, if you want to use exoteric terminology. So the left-hand path is a path of self-service. These are initiatic orders or groups where everything is about serving the individual needs. And that is a very dangerous path to walk for several reasons. The first reason being that civilization is built upon relationships of people. That everyone here lives in a relationship, at least one, if not a million. We all have communities of all different sizes, of all different styles. Even here we have, albeit limited with it being digital, we still have an interaction. Civilization requires everyone to work together. In most cultures across the world, there are some exceptions around the equator, it's all built on altruism. That I know that perhaps if I'm in need and I call on Brother Maya and say, Brother Maya, can you help me out? Whether or not she's thinking about it, she's going to know that if she says yes, that someday if she's in need and she calls me, I would help her out as well. There's a mutual beneficiary interaction there. And it's not evil. It's not bad. It is civilization. And so when you just have someone who all they do is serve themselves, it breaks that connectivity that is so essential for the fabric of civilization to function. And this is a problem when we get into hyper-individuality, that everything I do is for myself and for my own good. So when you look at the various different philosophic and religious and traditional or spiritual groups out there in your studies, be very mindful of what you're looking at, because one may lead to the left-hand path and then another may lead to the right-hand path. And they do have very different outcomes. The right-hand path is going to be a path of service and self-sacrifice. It is a much harder path than the left-hand path because it requires a lot of things that can go against our nature. So I find that this picture is quite misleading because it looks nice and flat to get to the sunshine. If I were to draw this, which you don't want me to, but if I were to draw this picture, I would make it full of mountains. I would have all sorts of tornadoes and earthquakes. I would make it very interactive because there's a lot of places where you can not hit right, and there's a lot of hazard along the way. But at the end, it has the greatest outcome. If you look at the left-hand path, not that it's smooth sailing either, I do think there's a cliff at the end there where you fall off and who knows where you go. But ultimately, this is the choice before you. Everyone here is here for a reason. And it's because your consciousness has brought you to some point in your understanding where you feel that there's something more than what you have, or you want to build out on what you found that is more than what you had, or whatever your reason. You need to be aware of the choices that are before you. And as distinct as these paths can be, we have to be careful because sometimes the right-hand path can slide into the left-hand path. because we start to do things for ourselves because we need to at some level, and we end up sliding onto the left-hand path. So we always have to be questioning what we're doing. One of the most beautiful experiences I had in Freemasonry and have continuing in Freemasonry is the permission to be a seeker. And yes, when you belong to the initiatic order, you do need permission from yourself, from the divine, and from the institution you're a part of to go seek and to go understand. So I'm constantly questioning, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right things? Do I still understand Masonry the way that Masonry thinks I should understand it, that Masonry is trying to get me to understand it? Or have I slid down the slope and gotten off course? That's something that we should always be asking. And that's not something that's just limited to the left or the right-hand path. You can have that same experience on the left-hand path, and hopefully at some point you wake up and say, but what am I doing? I'm not helping anybody but myself. So when we look at that, the right-hand path it's a little bendy there, but it's not so bifurcated. It's definitely, there's some crossovers at any given point. The right-hand path has many attributes that are positive. There are many things that are hard about it, and we'll talk about the right-hand path here more for the rest of our time together. The one thing I want to go back to with the left-hand path is I was saying there are several reasons why it's antithetical to the right-hand path. So we talked about how the relationships of civilization. It also breeds a very hedonistic, philosophic undertone, if not overtly so, someone's existence, because you're constantly trying to base your decisions on pleasure or pain. And it's usually coming from the body side of things, not the spirit/soul, depending on how you define it. So when you look at the left-hand path, you are feeding more of the animal instinct within man than you are elevating yourself out of that. And you have to be careful, because when it's, do whatever you want for yourself and have these different rituals to help promote yourself, that tends to breed a certain type of personality, a certain type of human being that is antithetical to serving the light. And so we have to be careful with that. So I guess there's a couple reasons. I said several. There's 2 reasons I can think of off the top of my head. That hedonistic, materialistic feed in constant, like a feedback circle. It's just constantly positively feedbacking into the system, saying, you need to do more. You need to do more for yourself. So these are your choices. And if this is something that you haven't really thought about, think about. And there are definitely, like I said, there's initiatic orders that are on the left-hand path that you can go look them up. And there's plenty on the right-hand path that you can also look up. Freemasonry being one on the right-hand path. So the path of the mystic. So let's say that you have decided to choose the right-hand path. And you got to keep in mind that the right and left hand, right, they're like molecules. They can mirror each other if they're very simple. You have the molecules that face each other that are exactly the same connectivity, but they have different chemical reactions. So you can have a sugar that's going to be a right-hand sugar, and you have a sugar that's a left-hand sugar. The left hand can be bad for you, the right hand good for you. So you have to figure out what their properties are. And once you've made the choice to go a certain way, then you can do the path of the mystic, and that would be on the right-hand path. So when we look at this, you have preparatory, occult, and mysticism. And this is the level of the path to a mystic. And I'm going to skip this slide because I want to come back to it. I don't want to give too much away, so just give me 1 second while I play with my PowerPoint, just because I don't want you to see something yet. Not that there's any great surprise. But what I would like to do is I'd like to go through each of those steps. So we're going to start here with preparation. All right. So the preparatory step. When you're in the preparatory step, and I'm going to lay these out, and I'm going to present it as a very linear process. For sure, it's not linear, but it is the most simplistic way to do it. The cleanest way to do it can be all over the place depending on how we view things. But for our intents and purposes, we'll go linear. I'm going to go through the preparation step, and then we're going to stop and go for questions and comments. Yes.
Brother Katie, are you just trying to share a slide right now?
Did not share. Well, it's looking good for me. Let's try that again. I guess you guys want to see what I'm saying. I suppose. All right, how's that? Is it sharing now?
Yes.
That's a minor technicality. You're just supposed to guess what I'm saying. All right, let's try it. So we're gonna do the preparation step. So in the preparation step, there is a budding or a nurtured desire to know more. So this can happen at any age. For me, it happened fairly late in my teens. I think some people come out of the womb feeling, that budding desire. I was not one of them. It took me much time and fostering of other individuals to help me, them fostering me to help me understand that desire was there, but it was there. You want to have a budding desire to know more. And it's not to sit there and say, all you have lied to me, all the people in my life and all the systems have lied to me. I don't think you need to have a negative reaction, although it does accompany, for most people, the experience. It's more of saying, that's not satisfactory. I feel like there's more to it than what I'm being told. Much like I was telling you with my, Chem 1 students, how they'd be like, there's something there that you're not telling us. And I'd be like, you should take my AP class. For the most part, they would, and then they would see, oh, okay. But they had to have the awareness to know that something more was present. It wasn't just what was being presented to them. When you look at this desire, you need to ask yourself, this is the preparation. Can you question and be questioned? It's really easy to ask lots of questions if you can, if you have the mind to do it. But to be questioned is a lot more painful. I'm a big fan of surrealist art, and there's this one image. And there's many renditions. I can't remember the artist's name at the time, but there's a person, and they are taking off. It's it's not gross or anything, but they're taking off their face, and they have their face in their hand, and they have underneath a vision or an image of the cosmos. And I absolutely love that image. Because when we look at it, when we can be questioned, that means that we are not connected to what we see in the outside world. Meaning that I'm not being identified as one thing or another, that I am infinite just like you, and that I'm eternal just like you. And that if I can take away my veneer, take away that which I give the world as this is Katie, if I can move that, then I can find the universe within me. And oftentimes, most often, I can't find it unless someone's asking me questions. For some of you who know, my husband's also a member of the Universal Co-Masonry, and there's nothing more irritating than him questioning my ideas. I hate it, but I love it. Not that I would tell him that, because it makes me have to really process why I think a thing. And why, if I have a very negative reaction to the question, why am I so attached to that label and that idea and that philosophy? And it's not to say that I don't stand for anything, because I definitely stand for something, but why can't I take off my face, if you will, and look at it and say, oh, you're right, that's not actually how it's seen. It's actually a little different, and adjust it a little bit and understand it deeper. So being questioned is more important than questioning, although questioning is also very important, because you have to do other people a favor of questioning them. We're very fortunate here in the general office that all of us here are Masons. So, any day in the general office, you will find someone being poked at by some philosophy by someone somewhere. And it's usually a big debate. And I go home feeling more satisfied than when I started work, because there's something for me to think about. And I got different perspectives. And those brothers in the office either challenged me, or I challenged them, or we did a collective, challenging. And it's not in a mean or, I'm trying to win idea. It's very much in a, well, what about, and how about, and what about this? And how do you interpret that? And what is this? How does this fit in there? And it really makes you have to think. So if you're someone who does not like to be questioned, you need to start opening yourself up to being questioned. Are you able to question that desire within you? Also, part of the preparation is a belief in the unseen. This can mean many things for many people. But if you just look at the world around you, I'm looking out my office window here, and there's evergreens everywhere, and if that's it, if that's all there is there anything more? And science will tell you that. You look at an evergreen and you have the needles, and they have different pigmentations and chlorophylls and chemicals, and the photosynthetic cycle. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. Is there something beyond that? And a question you can ask yourself: is the physical world all that exists? Is that it? Or is there something more? That's extremely important in a preparation step. Again, it's not to accuse nature of lying to you because it didn't tell you everything up front. Remember, you're building that consciousness. And to Brother Maya's point, your intuition will start to guide you the more you start to align yourself to the universe. And what that means is the more you seek, the more you question, the more that you try to entertain things that maybe you don't in the end believe, that for a moment, though, you can entertain why someone else might believe it, the closer you are to aligning yourself to the universe. And that means your intuition is going to start to connect and to anchor itself in the unseen and give you insights that perhaps you would have never had. Another part of preparation is mutability. This one's a little tricky, especially since people are like, well, you're you and I'm me, and we do things differently. Mutability, we have to be able to change. We have to be able to undo things that are not good for us. We have to be able to discipline ourselves, which is the next question. Can you be disciplined? And I'm not meaning this like, someone hitting you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, do you have the consciousness to discipline yourself? So, what that would look like is your body. Part of the preparation is your physical body, because your body is the first layer to yourself. It's the gross material that is in the physical world. It's the farthest emanation from the center, from the great architect of the universe. And can you discipline your body? I have a friend of mine who refuses to eat ice cream every once in a while just to see if he can live without it, because he apparently really likes ice cream. I always thought that was kind of nuts. I'm like, well, if you want it, like, as long as you're not eating like a pig, like, why don't you have some? But he was checking to see if he was still disciplined. And then if he saw that his resolve was weaker than maybe the time before, he knew he was off track. And so when we look at that, you don't have to be as mundane as ice cream, but when we look at mutability, what are standards that you have for yourself? What are standards that the universe has for you that you need to be disciplined in? Remember, consciousness can't live in a vessel that's unsuitable for it. So if you want to elevate your consciousness, your body has to be with that. So you have to make sure that you're disciplined in the things that you do in order to house the type of consciousness you wish to have. So when I say, can you be disciplined? Can you discipline yourself? Can you maintain, like, I really love this one thing and maybe I shouldn't have it, not because I love it, but probably because it's not good for me. What are things that are good for me that I should add into my life? And this can be basic stuff, basic hygiene, but it can be greater things that are easily addictive: food, alcohol, the type of entertainment you take in, social media, pornography. It can be anything. And I pick negatives because that's ultimately what we're trying to discipline our body against, because they're roadblocks to intuition. They're roadblocks to mysticism. They're roadblocks to getting to the highest. So can you remove yourself from those things and be disciplined about not accessing them? This one's always it's not tricky, but it's definitely a place for conversation, because everyone says, well, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. And that can be distilled into, well, you have your morality, I have my morality. And ultimately, morality is the guide through all of this. The difference between someone who takes the left-hand path in the beginning versus the right-hand path is that they use their morality and the positive systems of morality, because there's some systems out there that they're not good for the advancement of the human soul. So a question, this is rhetorical. This is something for you to gestate on. What is the foundation of your morality? And I have in this image, it is the 4 cardinal virtues. And in Masonry, these are really important cardinal virtues. You have prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. And those are extremely important because they're going to guide you on the path ahead. And so one of the first things I tell brothers that come into Masonry that I study with is, what's your morality? And if you don't know what it is, go find out what it is. And don't just pick one that you think sounds good. You really need to look at your actions to tell you the answer. And this is a very ambiguous question because it's hard to pin down what your morality is for a lot of people, but it's also a ubiquitous question because morality is everywhere. It's in everything that you do. So when you look at preparation for that right-hand path and going towards mysticism, you're going to see that you're going to have morality as a guide. That way you can stay on course and you don't slide into that left-hand path so easily. So as promised, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to open the floor for comments or questions. All right, Marcus, you are first.
I was just curious about the ties between mysticism and virtues and interpretation.
In what aspects? Because I feel like I can go a lot of different ways with that. Just like the general connectivity of those three. Can you unmute Marcus again? So there you are. Marcus, try it again. So in what way?
Well, I guess in America, it's mostly Christianity. So it'd be Christian mysticism, I guess, if I was...
Okay.
So maybe the separation of Gnosis or Gnosticism and Catholicism, I'm unsure.
Let me see if I can answer your question correctly, because I feel like I have a sense of it, but I feel like I might miss the mark on it. So when we look at the connection between mysticism and virtues, we are, in the Western world, obviously, especially in the United States and a lot of countries that are predominantly Catholic, there's a huge Christian overtone. In fact, you can't pull out Judeo-Christian ethics out of Western civilization. They are so intertwined that we don't even realize it. Even the people who are like, this Christianity is crap. And it's like, well, I mean, there's parts of your worldview that are from Christianity, whether you like it or not. So when we look at that, you'll see those virtues will be heavily integrated in a lot of different types of Freemasonry. When we look at universal Co-Masonry, you're going to see more of a Greek, classical Greek, ancient Greek interpretation. So when we look at the virtues such as justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude, that is obviously Christian. I do realize that, but it goes further back than Christianity. And that's where Masonry hails it from. And when we look at mysticism requires occultism, which we'll talk about here in a second, because it requires the virtues to understand the good. So one of the archetypes in Grecian philosophy is the good. And the good is the highest. It's the highest archetype of all things. And how do you know what is good? Like one of the biggest fears, I think a lot of people, even myself, when we're studying all this mysticism and we're studying occultism, well, you can't study mysticism, but occultism, and you're studying and preparing yourself, like you don't want to open yourself up to something that's not good. Like you don't want to put yourself out there and be in a world of hurt because you didn't do it right. So when you look at the virtues and the connectivity, the virtues are lighthouses. The lighthouse is on the spiritual shores that guide you so that you don't hit parts that are going to greatly hurt you spiritually, physically, mentally, psychologically, which is the biggest one. So when we look at the virtues, and I feel like I kind of have answered your question. Let me know if I haven't. But the virtues are tied in by guiding you straight to the North Star, guiding you to the transcendent instead of moving off center. Because I don't think you can get to the transcendent by serving the body alone, by just serving your basic needs. And, sex, that's all you care about is pleasure. You care about food. All you care about is being happy and, taken care of. That doesn't point you on the North Star. That points you very much downward. So those virtues are going to help you guide your path. If you don't want to think of, lighthouses on the spiritual shores. You can say it kind of like if you're in the forest and you're walking a trail, you have little lights along the way that help you to stay on the trail at night. It's the same idea. Those virtues are going to help guide you, especially if you internalize them and learn how to live them. Marcus, if I did not answer your question, throw it in the chat and let's see if I can get it right the second time. While you're doing that, let's go to Anthony.
Yeah, thank you. As far as the self-serving versus serving others aspect, and maybe this is a little too basic or oversimplified, but I figure it's worth saying. There's definitely a point where if you neglect yourself or don't take care of yourself to an appropriate level, you won't have the capacity to serve others properly. And there's all kinds of obvious examples of that. And then as far as the questioning part, and I guess the first part, that probably goes to the preparation aspect. And then as far as the questioning part, I've found in a lot of situations, especially where there's a authority or a really strong hierarchy or a culture of a specific belief, that if there is questions brought up or even the notion of questioning, and it's an environment where it's immediately shut down or disallowed, that's really telling in itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely wonderful points. To your first point, Anthony, yes, there's always some, even on the right-hand path, you have to take care of yourself. Like you said, it's the oxygen mask theory. Like you got to put it on first before you can help anyone else. But the difference is the intention and the wanted outcome. When I am, walking the right-hand path, I am trying to do it for the betterment of humanity and to the service of the great architect, versus I'm trying to do it for the betterment of myself. And they may look alike at first, in the way that it lays out in your life, but eventually they diverge quite drastically one from the other, because one is trying to aim for the highest and the other one is trying to aim for the material, that densest part of emanation. And so when you look at that, yes, you're absolutely right, and I don't disagree in any way, but we have to be mindful that intention and that want to get to the highest point has to be in front of us at all times. Else we, again, slide down and easily go into self-serving. So I think that's an excellent point. To your second point, it just flipped out of my head. What was the second point? You guys remember? It just flipped out of my head. Anthony, what was your second point? Can you unmute Anthony, please? Because it just literally left my brain. Anthony, can you say your second point?
Sure, I know the feeling. As far as questioning and specifically with authority and situation.
Thank you very much. Like I said, my memory's crap today. Yes, there is a place where it's well, I have questioned, and the people I questioned, they throw it right back at me. I've heard story after story of people being I was in church one day and I questioned bishop, primary teacher, parent, mom, whoever, and was they kicked me out or they punished me or they told me to shut up. I mean, I have had my own experiences in my youth of what that was like. And it is a telling sign. But there's also, when you look at it, when you look at an initiatic order, they should want you to ask questions. And what I love about Universal Co-Masonry, we're one of the few Masonic organizations that allow the discussion of religion and politics in Lodge. And let me preface, it's not like saying, I think this religion is right versus this religion is wrong, or I think this is the best prime minister in the world and this person sucks. It's not like that at all. It's very much the principles behind it. What is this religion about, first off? And what makes the principles, what is the theology of it? What is it trying to get you to do? And how does it relate to Masonry? Does Masonry have any correlation with that? With politics, we talk about, what makes a great leader, whether it's a president or a prime minister, doesn't matter. Whether it's of the priestcraft, doesn't matter. What is the principles that make a good leader? That's what we talk about. And there's lots of questions. And I've had brothers say to me, I don't agree with you Here's what I think. And then I'll say, okay, well, let's talk about it. Not that I'm trying to convince you, but tell me why you don't agree with me. But I've never had a brother turn to me and say, you're wrong. And that's language we don't use. Because one, it doesn't foster any conversation whatsoever. And just because I say you're wrong doesn't make you wrong. So when we look at it, it is very important that you are in a system where you can question and that you have the liberty to always question. I've had some really crazy questions in my time as a Mason that people have asked me, and I'm never offended by it, because why wouldn't you ask? If you have the question, then ask it. And that's really important. So absolutely, Anthony, I agree with you that, being in a space where questioning is allowed, it's important. And in Masonry, we have different officers. And, there's the master of the lodge all the way down to various officers. And when we're doing ritual work, we're addressed by that officer's name. So the master of the lodge, we're addressed as Right Worshipful Master. We don't say the person's name. But when if we're in a conversation and we're discussing a lodge, a particular topic, we address each other by, Brother Benjamin or Brother Patrick, independent of what their office is because they're talking from themselves. They're not talking in the position of their office. So even the head of our order, the most sovereign Grand Commander, when she speaks, there's times that she speaks as her first name, and there's times that she speaks in the official capacity to let us know that she's just giving her idea. This is what she thinks. This isn't coming down from the office of the most sovereign Grand Commander, which has a lot of weight to it. But there are things when, if it's ritual related and it has to be done a certain way, and it comes from the office of the most sovereign Grand Commander, like that means something. That's not the brother's opinion, that's the office. So there's a distinction in Masonry that we make to note that this isn't hierarchical pressure, meaning that the higher ups have more of an opinion that is accepted because they're the master of the lodge or they're second in command. You have this lowly initiate who's like, but I really know this particular topic, and can I not share? So there is that structure of hierarchy and respect where we delineate in lodge the difference of when an officer is speaking from his office versus a brother just sharing his opinion. And that alone creates the space for a very robust conversation, because they're just talking from their individual viewpoint and not trying to assert authority on their viewpoint through their office. Is that Brother Yane I see?
Yeah.
Brother Yane, you're up.
Good evening, Brother KT.
Good morning.
I just want to ask about virtue.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is it a part of virtue that is knowing one's, or knowing your strength and knowing your weaknesses?
I wouldn't say it's a virtue. I would say it is a part of being virtuous. There's not like a specific virtue that goes to that particular one. But I do think when you look at the closest virtue to it would be humility. Especially in Judeo-Christian cultures, humility has taken on the belief that you have to just be, kind of distance yourself from everything. Like, I can't do that. I'm not that great at it. You kind of downplay your talents. But if you really look at the virtue of humility, it's being honest in what you are and what you're not. You can look at and say, to your point, well, I'm really good at this stuff. I'm exceptional at this. And there's nothing vain or, unhumble about it. It's just being honest. Now, you can be those things. You can be vain about it and, do the appeal to authority and all that stuff. But when you look at a virtue that specifically goes to that, I would say humility would be the closest, although I think humility is more broad encasing. All right, we are almost out of time. Brother Patrick, is there anything on the platforms? Okay. Marcus said the question would be more comparing the education or scholastic magic utilized within things like Judaism, with mnemonics, within the alphabet, etc., compared to how within Christian mysticism immigrated areas like America, where we only interpret one rather than own, really interpret rather than own. Okay. I'm going to have to think about your question, Marcus, to give it a better answer. So give me a second and we're going to move forward. And then if I don't get to your question in the presentation, I will get to it after the presentation. So please, if I don't, stay after, because that's going to take me a second to process. And we are running out of time. All right, you can see my slides, right? I am sharing. Okay. All right, so the next one is occultism. So we talked about in occultism, so you've chosen a right-hand path, you did the preparation, which is discipline. It's discipline in every form, discipline in being questioned, discipline in questioning, discipline in your body, discipline in your thoughts. Those things is very, very important. You're getting your physical body prepared. The occultist, so when you have your physical body prepared, the occultist is going to have that higher consciousness, which means you're cultivating that intuition. You're starting to say, okay, I think there's more here. I can just feel it. I think there's something to this. I think this is actually what it's trying to say. My intuition is leading that way. But your physical body has to be ready to do that level of intuition. So an individual who's an occultist, this one is where a lot of people get stuck. You spend time daily in the advancements of your studies. You're trying to understand that underlying secret philosophy, that ancient philosophy that's been there, and you're trying to understand this. Now, this is hard for a lot of people because, we all have preferences. Like, I prefer this particular system of study over this particular system, and I'm just going to sit here and become a complete expert on this and negate everything that's out here. The occultist, the true occultist, will study everything, even that which he disagrees with, which in our society is pretty hard to do. You pick up a book, you start reading it, and you're like, this, I don't agree with anything that this author is reading. And you put it down and you don't really know the merits of their argument. And again, you may read the whole book and walk away and be like, I still don't agree with it, but you better understand the argument. An example of this. I have an essay I'm writing for, at the end of the year, and I was looking at the body-soul duality, and I was, researching, and I came into Ayn Rand. And for those who are not familiar with Randian philosophy, you should check it out. It's definitely something very different. And I started reading what the Randian philosophy was on the body-soul dichotomy, and I don't agree with it. It's very materialistic perspective. It's all about the body and how the body is the one that's entrapped, not the soul. But I didn't stop reading it just because I disagreed with it. In fact, I didn't realize, I've read a few books of Ayn Rand, but I'm no expert in her philosophy. I didn't realize I didn't even know they had an opinion, or she had an opinion on the body-soul dichotomy. And so I took the time to read about it. Even though at the end I was like, I still don't agree, but I understood it better. And when we look at the occultists, they will entertain the other side or the various sides that are out there, even if they disagree with it. Again, to better understand it, because when we look at all of the occult studies, which Ayn Rand is not necessarily occult studies, but when we look at all the occult studies out there, there are things that you may not agree with. Like, there's some left-hand path ritual work that I'm like, I don't agree with it, but I don't know very much about the specifics of it and why it's left-hand path. And I should study it so I can better understand what I personally am fighting against. I don't think you should walk that path, and here's the reason why. And occultist spends time doing that. We can't just sit in our own echo chambers and just love what we hear and not know all the other stuff that is out there. The occultists will spend daily time advancing their understanding of the universe. Not everything's pleasant, not everything's beautiful, but we should understand it, because eventually we'll understand why things are the way they are. And when we look at the occultists, this is it can be very intellectual, this step. But I would say it's more. It's a development of the mental body. So you have the physical body, and then you have the mental body. And that mental body, most people will think that when I say mental body, they go immediately to the local of the brain. The mental body is everywhere. It's the entire form. It's that body that is within the dense body, but it's still without. So it's kind of, think of it as emanating out from the center. The whole body is mental. It's a place of all of our thought forms. It's a place of all of our, what's the word? I can't think of the word. It is a place where things are created and things are processed at a different consciousness. And so when the occultist is studying, he's trying to get into the mental body deeper And mental in the classical sense, not like in the modern sense, where it just means cerebral. Everything's the mind. It's measurable, it's empirical, and that's it. No, the occultist sits there and it's kind of like that picture I showed you of the serpent and the lion. You're just staring at it and letting that sit within you and understanding what it means and going through and not having knee-jerk reactions and assumptions about what you find. So it leads you to a deeper understanding. That's what the occultist is trying to do. And this deeper understanding is not just of yourself, but ultimately of what is humanity and what is the universe and how they interplay with themselves. And as I said, the occultist entertains the possibility of all things. And as I was talking with Brother Yane a minute ago, humility is brought up. The occultist has an intellectual and spiritual humility, meaning that they realize they don't know everything and that they have much more to learn than what they know, but they also know what they know. And you're not going to be able to tell them otherwise. You're not going to be able to dress good as evil and evil as good for an occultist. They'll be able to see through that because the consciousness is built this way. The consciousness has elevated to a higher level where their ability to intuit meaning, their ability to see beyond the simple, dense shapes, allows them to see what it's all about. I have this image here, and I absolutely love this painting, is the 7 liberal arts and sciences. So the 7 liberal arts and sciences are hailed to ancient Grecian times, Roman Grecian, where you have your trivium, which is going to be logic, rhetoric, and logic, rhetoric. What's my third one?
Logic, grammar, and rhetoric.
Did I say them all? Logic, rhetoric, and grammar? No, the grammar's one. So logic, rhetoric, and what's the one I keep forgetting?
Grammar.
No, grammar is, grammar. Grammar is not part of the quadrivium. I'm missing in geometry. So you have those 3 liberal arts, and then you have the 4 sciences, which is arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And these 7 liberal arts and sciences, the trivium is the first 3, the quadrivium is the last 4. These 7 liberal arts and sciences were taught in Grecian times, Roman Grecan times, to better elucidate philosophy and religion. The Greeks believed that you couldn't get to the higher understandings of philosophy and religion without understanding these 7 liberal arts and sciences. And so the occultists, when you look at the Renaissance and Enlightenment and even Freemasonry, the occultist is given the task of studying the 7 liberal arts and sciences to help prepare them for the mystic road ahead, to help them prepare to understand religion and philosophy as it was meant to be. And so this one is a very hard step to do for a lot of people because it does require study to understand all the basics that is out there of the universe and humanity. Now, this is the tricky part because this is the easiest place to get stuck. You can't move forward. A lot of people just stay here because they think they can intellectualize God. They think that they can make the great architect, they can meet him in a book. They can find him in between the passages. And although, yes, to some level you can, it's very much like seeing the shadows on the cave of Plato's wall. When you look at the occultist step, this is very fundamental. And some people don't want to do it, but you do need to study the various systems that are out there. Here's to the mystical. In this story, I think many people have heard. But for those who haven't, it's from Lao Tzu. A scholar widely known for his keen intellect visits a Tao master at his humble abode. The master graciously serves him tea, just like he does to every visiting guest. While the master is pouring tea, the scholar talks about the Tao. The master continues pouring even when the cup is filled to the brim. The cup soon overflows, and the scholar can no longer pretend not to see it. "It's overfull, sir," he exclaims. "No more tea will go in." "You are like this cup," says the master. "How can I show you the Tao unless you're first empty your cup?" And as I said, it's from the Tao Machine. This is a very beautiful illustration of ultimately what the mystic is seeking. You have to build the cup. The cup has to be in good condition. That's the preparation. You have to be able to fill it full of tea, which is going to be the occultist. When it says no more tea will go in, there comes a point where occulticism can only take you so far. After that, you have to empty that which you have built up. And don't ask me how to do it. That's not something I can tell someone to do. That's something you have to find on your own. But you have to empty out that cup. You have to give death to scholastics in some way. It doesn't mean that they aren't important or have value. It means that you have to be able to separate yourself, much like that masks from the body, to let something else in. To let something else in. Your consciousness is now ready to take on something greater than facts and mystery and magic. It's something transcendental, which is ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to transcend. You're trying to go from the material to that which is above. And here you see a star on top of Jacob's ladder. That's the star of initiation, which is mysticism. Freemasonry, this process, not just for yourself, like in the left-hand path. It's the Bodhisattvic vow, if you're familiar with that you have worked through this process. And some believe it takes one life, others believe it takes multiple. I don't know the answer to that question, but it takes time and effort and patience and pain, surrender and self, to serve others and to get rid of the self in some way, to get up that ladder. And then once you've reached the transcendent, once you have experienced oneness in its ultimate form, then you take what is called the Bodhisattva vow in Eastern philosophy, which is that you choose to come back and serve humanity. So the difference is that we're coming back to help humanity. Universal Co-Masonry's aim is to the glory. Everything we do in our work is to the glory of the great architect and to the perfecting of humanity. We're trying to get to be the oneness with the divine, not just for that pure ecstasy of ourselves of being like, man, like I can't even think there's words to describe it. But it's ultimately to come back and help those behind us lift their consciousness up, like those who have done for all of us. And those individuals have names, they have ideas around them, they're an entirely different topic, but people who come back and try to help raise the masses out of their ignorance and out of that lower consciousness, to help infuse in them the love of mystery, wonder, magic, intuition is their goal. They're trying to get us all up that ladder. I once, at the beginning of our presentation, said that you have the symbol, you have the occultist, and then you have the exoteric back here. The mystic is going to be able not just to see the symbol, which conceals the truth, which is sitting on the other side. Symbols are meant to conceal, not to reveal, to conceal the truth. The mystic is going to be able to lift the veil, move past the symbol, and be with the truth or the divine on the other side. That is what the mystic is trying to do. But in order to get to the transcendent, in order to get to that northern star, you have to first see the symbol, which is the occultist path. And that's why I present this in a very linear fashion. My younger self would tell you that you could do one or the other. You could be occultist or mystic. And really, my experience has not been that at all. In Masonry, it has shown me a very different way that you have to go through the process of preparation, go through the process of occultism to get to mysticism. And this is how it lays out in Masonry. So the preparatory stage we talked about was the physical body. In Masonry, you can see that as the entered apprentice. We're talking about the discipline. You have to sit a certain way. Here's an example of an Egyptian rendition. You have to sit a certain way. You can't just sit there. You can't be on your cell phone. You can't be talking to your neighbor across the room. Or you're very disciplined. That's the preparatory stage. That's giving you the chance to be silent, to close your mouth so that you can start to hear what is being said. The occult is going to be the mental body, as I was saying. And I have the image up here of the thinker, which I think is a beautiful sculpture. When you look at the mental body, you're processing everything. This is the second degree, or the fellowcraft degree in Freemasonry. And this is getting you to understand that there are symbols. There's more than just, the body and the discipline. There's more to it than just, existing in this world, which a lot of people do. You have to study, you have to think, you have to process, you have to question. And even though each degree is laid on top of the other degree, it's not as simple as like once you get to the second degree, you never think of the first degree. You're constantly preparing your body all the time. and having that physical discipline. You're constantly in the occult, you're constantly in the philocraftery, trying to understand the symbols and what they mean and what they're trying to teach you. And then you have that spiritual body, which is mysticism. And that's the Master Mason degree. It's letting go of things that, all the thoughts that you had and trying to transcend and lift the veil and commune with the highest. There's a really great, and they made a movie, The Dark Crystal, off of it. And they have and I'm not going to go on the show, but they have the story of the Dark Crystal is there was an entities that came to the earth, and they split. And you got the Skeksis and you had the mystics. And the Skeksis were the people, or the part of the individual that really everything was about learning everything they could in this world and just taking it. The laboratories, they had the precious kingdoms, and they had all of that stuff, and they didn't want to leave that world, even though they were supposed to leave that world. That can be the occultist if you don't leave it behind. The mystic was the higher consciousness. It was the higher understanding that the spiritual body needed to be met with a vessel that could carry the consciousness that goes with it. And the story's been out for a long time, so I'm going to ruin not the punchline, but the story plot. Ultimately, the Skeksis and the mystics, you don't realize they're separate, or they're actually one entity until the very end. They're reunited into one individual and they're made whole. In that particular movie, even though it's very 1980s in a lot of ways, is extremely profound if you look at it, because it's trying to tell us that you can't do one without the other. The mystic that has no foundation has no foundation, and you don't know what ladder you're climbing. And the occultist, if you just stay in the occultist, starts to become very left-hand path and gets stuck further and further in matter. And as we know in science, the greater the mass, the greater the gravity. It's harder to get out of. And so they got more steeped in that matter until time and circumstances in the story united the two forces together and allowed them to transcend out of that planet, out of that position. So if you've never seen the movie, I recommend it. It's a series, I think it is. But when we look at Freemasonry, this is the mysticism of Freemasonry. It's that it's helping us along a certain path, a path that is made for the initiated. It's not meant for everyone. Not everyone wants to do it. Not everyone can see it. Not everyone is willing to take that bodhisattvic vow and come back and help. That's ultimately what Freemasonry is trying to prepare us for, is to be able to be one with the universe, one with the divine, but not for our own personal ecstasy, but for the betterment of humanity, so we can understand limitlessness and what it's like to be with the one. And we can come back and help others elevate their consciousness through through experience. And so hopefully tonight's presentation gave you something to look at as a path. Have to make sure that you're going to choose consciously which path you're going to lead your life on. And then you have to look at your days are precious. Whether we have one life or many, the days are still precious. Are you working towards something higher than yourself? Yes, you need to improve yourself. I 100% agree with Anthony. But that can't be your only goal. There has to be more to it. When we start aligning ourselves with the universe, that intuition dials us into a whole nother world that allows our consciousness to be elevated. Anything that scares you, you should understand it, because fear is the greatest obstacle. And once we understand a thing, we can either move around it, we can move through it, or we can move beyond it. And that allows us to be in control of how we ascend that ladder of ascension, that ladder towards the divine. So I hope this evening, as I said, that you were able to get something from our discussion. I am out of time, clocking myself, I'm 5 minutes over. So I want to respect everyone's evening or morning, depending on where you're coming from. But this is a serious thing. The mysticism of Freemasonry is so inherent in its fabric. You can't separate the two. And it requires an active role. That's why Masonry is solar in its ritual. It is an active force. You can't just sit there and unzip your head and let people stuff stuff in there and then shut it and move on your way. It doesn't work that way. You won't get anything out of it if you try it that way. It is active. And if you are trying to tread the path of a mystic, try to tread the path of initiation, which is what another way of saying it, then there's work to be done. And there's going to come a time where we're not going to be able to work anymore. And you're going to have to ask yourself, did you use your time wisely? And, hopefully the answer is yes. And you felt guided through your moral discipline, through your occult studies, and through your transcendent experiences. The last thing I'll say before we close out is that when someone speaks of their transcendent experiences, to someone else, I'd be very cautious about that, because that which is transcendent is incommunicable. It's not something that can be shared because it's not meant to be shared. It's for you and you alone. And that is something that you need to be mindful of. There's a lot of, I talk about esoteric waters a lot, maybe in my head, maybe to no one else, esoteric waters, but there's a lot of crocodiles in those esoteric waters. You have to be careful as you pass through those esoteric waters that you don't give yourself to the crocodiles. And the crocodiles are the charlatans, the people who would misuse their information or their experiences, or manufacture experiences that never happened to become, self-aggrandized. Be mindful of that. Trust in a system that you know is trustworthy. And if you don't know what that is, then you need to start looking. And so Freemasonry allows for that crossing through the esoteric waters without being attacked by the spiritual crocodiles, because it is an ancient and old system that has gone through the work of initiation and ritual that helps mark the individual as ready to raise their consciousness, so that they can not only see the symbol, but lift the veil that's covering the truth and ascend towards the highest. If you ever want a really good example of the path of initiation, or the path of a mystic, or a path of a Mason, it's Plato's allegory of the cave. Eventually, if you do it right, you'll see the sun. Or if you don't, you'll forever see just the shadows on the wall. With me and Brother Benjamin and Brother Patrick, as well as your morning if you're dialing in from the Philippines. It was very wonderful to have you. We'll be staying on for another 10-15 minutes to answer questions, as well as questions about Freemasonry in general, as well as in these particulars. So thank you very, very much. We're going to wait till the platforms that we're streaming on gets terminated, and then I'll open up the floor. Next month, I have no idea what we're going to choose, but for those who've seen me before, I always choose about 2 weeks before, because I want to make sure we pick the right topic. So look for that email. This is being recorded. It's going to be put on our YouTube page, and I think that's the only place that we post it. Right?
Facebook as well.
Oh, Facebook as well. We have it on both pages, or on both platforms rather, so you're free to watch this as many times as you like. So have a wonderful evening, and we'll wait till those platforms are shut off.